You put on a shirt this morning without thinking about it. You didn't consider it, you didn't question it, but the real answer for why you did that is far stranger than you think. You assume it was the cold. Everyone assumes it was the cold. A shivering ancestor somewhere in an ice age wraps an animal hide around his shoulders, and clothing is born. Simple, logical, wrong. Here's the problem. Humans lost most of their body hair long before clothing existed. That means for a long stretch of prehistory, your ancestors were naked, hairless, and living through freezing nights with nothing but skin. If the cold alone drove clothing, they should have invented it the moment they needed it. They didn't. Why the delay? Scientists have actually traced the answer, and it isn't written in old coats or fur scraps. It's written in lice. Dr. Mark Stoneking, a geneticist who studies human evolution, led research comparing the DNA of two types of lice that live on humans today. One is head lice, which has been with us since we had fur covering our bodies. The other is body lice, which lives exclusively in clothing. Body lice cannot survive without fabric, no clothes, no body lice. So by measuring how long ago body lice genetically split off from head lice, researchers could estimate almost precisely when humans started wearing clothes. The number that came back surprised almost everyone, roughly 170,000 years ago, not during the coldest part of the last ice age, long before it. So if it wasn't the cold, what was it? Around 195,000 years ago, anatomically modern humans emerged in East Africa, warm East Africa. Clothing wasn't a survival necessity there, and yet tens of thousands of years later, clothing appears anyway. Something else was happening. Around that same window, something remarkable was unfolding in human cognition. Symbolic thought, self-awareness, the ability to imagine how another person sees you. Anthropologist Ian Gilligan, who has spent years studying the origins of clothing, argues that the first garments weren't functional at all. They were symbolic, ornamental, a way to say something about who you were long before they became a way to survive the cold. Think about that for a second. The first piece of clothing in human history may not have been a coat. It may have been closer to a costume. Around 100,000 years ago, archaeologists found something that supports this directly. Perforated shell beads found in caves in both Israel and Algeria, deliberately pierced so they could be strung and worn. These shells had no survival function. They didn't keep anyone warm. They didn't protect anyone from thorns or sun. Their entire purpose was to be seen. Your ancestors were dressing before they were freezing. Here's where it gets even stranger. Once clothing existed, even just as decoration, it did something no fur coat ever could. It became a language. A fur coat says nothing about you individually. Everyone's fur looks the same, but a necklace of shells strung a particular way, worn by one person and not another, said something. Status, group identity, skill, maybe even desirability. For the first time, an animal on Earth could broadcast identity through an object it chose to wear. This is the part that should feel uncomfortably familiar. You still do this every single day. When you choose a jacket, you are not simply choosing insulation. You are choosing a signal. Sneakers that cost $400 protect your feet exactly as well as sneakers that cost $40. The extra $360 is buying something invisible. Status, belonging. A story about who you are before you've said a single word. Psychologist Karen Pine has researched what she calls enclothed cognition. The idea that what you wear doesn't just signal something to others, it actually changes how you think and perform. In her studies, people who believed they were wearing a doctor's coat performed better on attention tasks than people wearing the exact same coat described as a painter's smock. Same fabric, same fit, different meaning, different brain. That's not modern marketing manipulating you. That's a 100,000-year-old mechanism still running quietly underneath your decisions. Now here's the twist that changes everything. Once clothing existed as a symbol, it eventually did become a survival tool too, but for a reason that has almost nothing to do with body heat directly. Around 70,000 to 100,000 years ago, as humans began migrating north out of Africa into colder European and Asian climates, clothing that had started as ornamentation was repurposed. Humans didn't invent clothes because it got cold. Clothing already existed, and it turned out to be extraordinarily useful once the cold arrived. Function followed form, not the other way around. This flips the entire assumption most people carry about human innovation. You tend to imagine our ancestors as purely practical creatures, solving problems one crisis at a time. Hungry, so they hunted. Cold, so they built fires. Freezing, so they made coats. But clothing suggests something different. It suggests that identity, symbolism, and self-image were driving forces in human survival long before raw necessity demanded it. You didn't become human because you learned to survive. You became human because you learned to mean something, to yourself and to others, and survival followed. There's one more detail worth sitting with. Lice research also revealed something about which humans wore clothing first, and it wasn't evenly distributed. Populations that migrated into colder regions show a much older body lice divergence than populations that remained in warmer climates, which tells you clothing spread the same way most human technologies do, not everywhere at once. It moved with people, adapted with environment, and became more essential the further humans wandered from where they began. You are, in a very real sense, wearing the result of 100,000 years of migration every time you get dressed. And so think again about this morning. You reached into a closet full of fabric, and without a flicker of conscious thought, you picked something that said a version of you to the world. Comfortable, professional, rebellious, invisible. Every choice was a whisper of the same instinct that made someone press a shell through a hole with a bone needle in a cave 100,000 years ago. They weren't trying to stay warm, they were trying to be seen. And so are you. The next time you get dressed, notice the moment before you choose. Notice that flicker of consideration, even if it lasts half a second. That flicker is not new. That flicker is not modern vanity, or Instagram, or fashion marketing. That flicker is one of the oldest threads running through the entire story of human cognition. Long before your ancestors needed clothing to survive the cold, they needed it to survive as social creatures, understood and recognized by the people around them. You put on a shirt this morning without thinking about it, but somewhere underneath that automatic motion, 100,000 years of human history got dressed with you.